you don't understand why things aren't working because you think you're eating quote unquote healthy things and your sugar's going up and your waistline's going up. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought I was doing all the right things. And it's a thing, it's unlearning some belief systems and starting to learn about food again and how food reacts with you, how food reacts with your blood sugar. What does that do to your insulin? What does that do to you who might be type 1 and you rely on, maybe it's a basal or a sliding scale, or even if you're type 2, maybe we can reverse some of that so that you don't have to go on insulin eventually.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Type 1 in Midlife podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Slemp. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 14 years old and now founder and CEO of Abundant Health with Melissa. And as a certified health coach, I know the unique challenges of managing diabetes in midlife and beyond. So I've created a coaching model that has empowered hundreds of women to thrive despite their diagnosis. And each week, I'll bring you conversations and strategies with guest experts, along with insights from my own 40 plus years of living with type 1 diabetes. I'll also share how my faith empowers me both emotionally and helps me to navigate the daily challenges. So if you're a woman ready to redefine your diabetes journey, this podcast is for you. So before we dive in, remember this podcast isn't a substitute for personalized medical advice. Always consult with your physician or medical professional before making any changes to your diet, insulin dosages, or healthcare plan. Well, today in this episode, I am excited to be joined by Amy Wilson. She's a board-certified geriatric pharmacist, a certified fitness professional, and nutrition coach using the Faster Way to Fat Loss platform. She is a passionate advocate for using nutrition and fitness to prevent and reverse some diseases. With personal and professional experiences, Amy shares the transformative power of diet and exercise in changing lives, especially as we're aging. And from witnessing clients reversing prediabetes and high cholesterol, Amy emphasizes the importance of a tailored, unique nutritional program specific to each of us to really enhance our health and our fitness levels. And she draws from her own background in geriatric pharmacy. Amy dives into how her expertise transitioned into her current role of empowering individuals to take control of their bodies and their minds. And she highlights today the lack of education among patients, particularly in the diabetes management time of life during menopause. And she sheds some light on common medications like Ozempic and Metformin. And today, Amy addresses the overlooked factors impacting midlife women's health, such as insulin resistance due to declining estrogen levels, and offers us some support into optimizing our nutrition, strength training, getting stronger, reducing stress, and we even talk about hormone replacement therapy as something that we can bring in to help support us as well, and to understand the insulin's role in weight management and to build strong, healthy muscles. Not a topic we are not used to hearing from around here, but we are excited to bring this to you today. Welcome, Amy, and I will link all of the ways to get in touch with her. And she has a free 5-day fat loss blueprint with some recipes that she wants to share with you. So be sure to check that out right here in the show notes. We hope you enjoy the show, and please reach out if you have any comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts about this topic today. Nothing you hear on this Type 1 and Midlife podcast should be a substitute for professional medical advice. Please always consult your doctor before changing your diet, insulin dosages, or healthcare plan. Well, hello, we are back in here this week, and I am excited to have Amy Wilson with me today. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Melissa. So good to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you reached out and you have a lot of knowledge and experience that my listeners need to know even more about. We were just talking before I hit record about how insulin can just be it's something we think we know about, but I think especially when we hit menopause, it's a whole new definition or appreciation for how it works in the body. So yeah, that's definitely something that we'll expand on. So tell us a little bit about your training and education. And you started in the geriatric pharmaceutical, right? Is that the right way to say it? Pharmaceutical
It's I'm a board.
industry?
Well, yeah, I'm a board certified geriatric pharmacist. What that means is I work in the long term care industry. I'm a consultant pharmacist, and I always say I want to say I'm a kind of a triple threat. So I am a pharmacist, I am a certified nutrition coach, and I am a certified fitness professional. So I have the
Mm,
exercise, the diet, nutrition, and then the nice thing about being a pharmacist is understanding disease states, understanding what people are going through, and then also understanding the medications that people use, because it does come back to nutrition and fitness and how things can work and intertwine. And so, yeah, I have to say, a lot of times I see the end result of poor nutrition and lifestyle
yeah.
in my nursing homes. And I am
Mm,
on a mission to keep people healthy and out of them. So that is
mm,
what I'm always
love that.
preaching. I am not somebody who's going to tell you that you need to be looking at your weight, because I think the scale is evil. But I will tell you that you need to be watching what you're eating, as not as how much you're eating, but what kind of food you're eating, and that you do need to be building muscle. And that is something that, especially us in midlife, when we grew up in the 70s and 80s, it was all about being skinny. And it was
Mhm.
all, we were told that no, you don't want to lift weights because that's going to make you a man. That's going to make you big and bulky.
Right. That
It's
was the
so
myth. Yeah.
far from the
Hmm.
truth.
Hmm.
And we have to understand that in our midlife is a time where we can either lose muscle or we can keep and build muscle.
Hmm.
And that is what I'm kind of like on a mission about, is to help people see that, to get that, and also use fuel and food not as a not as the enemy, that it's
Yeah.
it's it's okay to eat and we should
Yeah.
like eating, but it's what we eat and how it reacts with our body that is what we need to start focusing on.
Absolutely. And that is why I was drawn to you, because that's my mission as well. I mean, as many of the listeners know, I live with type 1. I'm postmenopause. So I've seen all this in action, and I totally agree. One of the things that you mentioned was the scale, and whether or not that's a really, as women, that's a topic, that's a pain point.
Mhm.
And really the weight is really just a symptom. That's the end result of poor nutrition. It might be the effects of, like you mentioned, drugs. And insulin is a big driver in this, and it's not necessarily something that is talked about. I just did an episode 48 with Kim Hines, and we talked about GLP-1s and Ozempic, and that is such a craze right now. And I would love for you to speak on this too. What if you, and I'm assuming you know this connection, because you should, because because we know what we're talking about, and I know you know
Mhm.
what you're talking about. The connection with these GLP-1. So these are natural hormones that are occurring in the body,
Mhm.
and the fact that they're being used as a weight loss drug. They're also being used as type 1, insulin dependent. It's starting to be kind of introduced because of insulin sensitivity, and that is the main driver. And that, when it starts out and this drug is prescribed, it's generally speaking in type 1s, or I'm sorry, type
Type
2s.
2, type 2, yeah.
Right. So that is really where the drug was really introduced, right? But it all comes back to insulin,
It
because
does.
it's reducing insulin, which is a
Yeah.
fat storing hormone. So
It does. The other thing too is that, GLP-1s were a mistake. And you have these good mistakes of things that happen in medicine. It's like they found this hormone in the gut and like, oh wait, what does it do? Well, they didn't realize. They're like, oh my gosh, it helps with insulin sensitivity. Great. Well, it does a lot of other things besides insulin sensitivity. It also slows down GI motility and how things move through the gut. The
Mhm.
other thing that it does, Ozempic does, is that it is such a high powered GLP-1, meaning
Mhm.
that we have GLP-1s in our gut. We eat protein that stimulates the GLP-1 to be released. It helps keep us satisfied. It helps tell us that we're full.
Mm.
But that GLP-1 in our gut has what's called a short half-life. It doesn't stay in your system very long. What Ozempic is that it's that GLP-1 times 100 or
Mm.
1,000 because it's dosed once a week. That GLP-1 is also has receptors in our brain. And
Mm.
what they are thinking of, because we're now seeing why, how does it affect appetite? How is it affecting people who have addictions? What we're seeing and what the theory is that because it's such a high potency GLP-1, it's going in the brain, crossing the blood-brain barrier, and it's with the appetite suppressant in your head. It's with the nausea receptors. So because
Mhm.
that's why we see nausea, that's why we see vomiting with it. So all these things that also cause you to lose weight. It's not just the insulin, it's other things. The problem with that, and everybody's like, but yeah, that's what I want. I wanted to shut my appetite off. No, you
Mhm.
don't.
Mhm.
Because what happens is, and especially type 1, is that you need to eat. I mean, that is something that you have to do. We all do, not even with type 1, type 2, or
Mhm.
normal. You have to eat. And when you don't eat, your bodies are very, very smart.
Mhm.
And if you're not giving it its nutrition, if you're not giving it the amino acids it needs, it's going to take it from muscle. And guess what?
Mhm.
Your muscle is your metabolism. Your muscle is your fountain of youth.
Mhm.
And then if you're not giving it vitamin minerals, because you're not eating, it's going to take it from your bones. So now
Mhm.
you're looking at osteopenia and
Yeah.
osteoporosis. So what I almost say is that if you're using it for a weight loss drug, not for diabetes, because let's face it, there's some things that we need. If you are totally insulin resistant, nothing is working, your A1C is going up. Yes. Is it a good possible medication for you to use? Yes. But you also need to be focusing on your nutrition because we
Mhm.
don't want to cause other issues. We want to make sure that we're getting to the root cause. We want to make sure that we're doing what we need to do and we're not doing what's called polypharmacy. Okay, so you're not eating or you're nauseous. Now we add Zofran or
Right.
Phenergan. Oh, guess what? You're constipated. So now we're adding another medication.
Mhm.
And we
Mhm.
don't want to get into that constant polypharmacy issue and increase your aging process because you're losing minerals, because you're losing muscle. I almost
Mhm.
say we're going to see something in probably next 5 years called old lady syndrome, that we're
Mhm.
going to see people who are just using it for diet to
Right.
lose weight, that we're going to see that they look older, that they're going to do something we call in geriatrics called frailty, that they're going to look weak. They're going to look frail. We're going to see increased bone breaks, increased hip fractures, and that's not what we want. It's all
Mhm.
about health and I would say longevity is what we want to really
Right.
focus on.
Right. Sustainable habits.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes. It's just another diet gimmick trick.
Oh, I mean,
It's short term. You can't sustain it.
the amount of gimmicks
Yeah.
that are out there right now is crazy,
Mhm.
and what hurt, I won't say it hurts, it's just y- when someone, Oprah, goes on and says everybody should be on this medication. No, no. And we're not looking at root cause. We're not thinking of our body as one big chemical reaction, the enzymes that we need, the food that we need for these chemical
Mhm.
reactions to occur. And yes, do I get the struggle with weight loss? Absolutely. I've been there. I deal with it on a daily basis, not only with me, but with my clients. I get that, but there is a better way. And to try to rely on a medication that could cause issues. that could cause gastroparesis, because that is I won't say a side effect, but it is an outcome sometimes of diabetes, as gastroparesis.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You don't want that. You don't want to cause that by a side effect of a medication that is makes it irreversible.
Yeah.
That's not something that we want. So when we can start looking at other ways, maybe more holistic, more natural,
Mm-hmm.
does it take longer? Yeah. Is it frustrating sometimes? Oh, yes. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, it's a
Right.
daily struggle, but the way that I look at it too is that I'm looking at my future self. I'm looking at somebody who is going to be, in 20 and 30 years. Is that woman staring back at me in the mirror going to be like, girl, you did what you should be doing right now? Or is it going to be all the what ifs, what coulds, what shoulds? And
Right.
that's not what you want. And
Mm.
it's a daily journey of getting healthier, getting stronger.
Yeah. Some great points. I appreciate you sharing all that. And our topic was not going to be on Ozempic, but I appreciate and it's funny because we just opened it up, but it's just so topical right now, and
Yeah.
I think it's so important to get some truth and some really good sound advice for people, whether or not they make the decision or not. Which is what Kim and I shared when we talked about it as well. It's just getting the facts, talking to a doctor that knows how to prescribe it, and lifestyle that needs to go with it if and when you
Mhm.
decide to get off it. And then have a plan if you get off it. That's another whole
Well,
topic.
yeah,
Oh
and
my goodness.
I'll be honest, I have
I'm
clients
sure you
who
do.
are on it. I
Mm-hmm.
have clients who are getting off of it. And yeah, it's having a plan. It's learning how to eat. It's learning how to navigate. It just, no matter what you're doing, you never have to do things alone. And don't just
Mm-hmm.
rely on Dr. Google. Get help. There's resources out there to help you along your journey.
Yeah. So how do you help? And that's a big wide open question, I know. But if you could walk us through nutrition wise, what do you think? I found myself with people and ladies and these are friends as well that come to me, just knowing what I love to do and
Hmm.
how I coach. Just educating them on nutrition. I think that they seem to think that it's more complicated than it is. And I don't mean to simplify it that much, but it really is about real food and just understanding how your body responds to certain foods and combinations of food. Because I do tend to, I eat more of a Mediterranean diet.
Hmm.
I really eat anything. I eat animal protein, plant-based, all of it. It's all about just really good quality ingredients.
Hmm.
And I think just the fact of that is, it's obviously getting the junk out as much as I can. I'm not perfect, and there is no perfect, there is no perfection. There's going to be times where you can slip up or just have a treat once in a while, which is living. But it's really
Yes.
just the understanding of what it is that we choose to eat and how our body is going to respond, especially with type 1 diabetes. And I think going back in the days when if you were lucky enough to work with a dietitian or a nutritionist, and I think lucky might be that might be a term that, well, anyway, just take this for what it is, for what I'm about to share. But the topic that I get asked is, how many carbs can I eat every day? I'm like, well, what kind of question is that?
Because
Because
that's what you get when you go
how
to,
much,
when you,
right?
and this is always frustrating to me,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I am a pharmacist, but when people would
Mm-hmm.
come to me and they show me their sheet, and it's like, they go there, they just got diagnosed, whether it's, type 2, type 1, just got diagnosed, have their thing with the registered dietitian, and oh, well, it's all about carbs and sliding scale. And if I have this much carbs, and it's like, there was no discussion about the type, what they were eating, fiber,
Mm-hmm.
protein, fat. It was all about, well, I can have this many carbs. And in their head, it's bread, pasta,
Right.
cakes, cookie, and then using insulin to
Kind of measure it out, right?
measure it out.
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
get
when I
it.
always say you can't out train a
Mm-hmm.
bad diet. And it's like, you're
Mm-hmm.
almost trying to use insulin for a bad diet. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what you don't want to do. And
Okay.
that's with my clients, I'm virtual. So I have clients all over the world, and I do have type 1. I have people who are on pumps, and I have type 2.
Mm-hmm.
I carry the type 2 diabetes gene. So I was pre-diabetic for when menopause hit. That was
Mm.
kind of awakening. And
Yeah.
it does come down to learning about food,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
we've gotten into this thing with society that everything is fast and quick and easy.
Hmm.
And a lot of it's processed. And it's not, and I always tell people it's not your fault. You only know what you know, and you only know what's in your articles, that your magazines that you're reading, or the news that you're consuming. And a lot of it is skewed and doesn't tell you the whole story. And a lot of it makes it like, oh, you're busy, so you need to have this thing that you can heat up in the microwave real quick.
Hmm.
Healthy choice, lean cuisine, those things
Sure.
aren't healthy.
Hmm.
Those things are going to totally skyrocket your blood sugar, but you're being told it's healthy. And then you don't understand why things aren't working, because you think you're eating quote unquote healthy things, and your sugar's going up and your waistline's going up. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought I was doing all the right things. And it's a thing, unlearning some belief systems and starting to learn about food again, and how food reacts with you, how food reacts with your blood sugar. What does that do to your insulin? What does that do to you who might be type 1, and you rely on, maybe it's a basal or a sliding scale, or even if you're type 2, maybe we can reverse some of that so that
Hmm.
you don't have to go on insulin eventually.
Hmm. Hmm. And you mentioned something just a minute ago too about how we don't have to, and this is kind of my focus as well personally, is I want to look at other ways of balancing my blood sugar
Mhm.
besides insulin. So, and I think I recognize this even more when my hormones were dropping, and obviously my insulin needs were going up based on that. And knowing that I had to kind of tighten up, and I mean that in a kind way. I mean, I was always kind of eating well, but I think I was becoming more, just even more aware of the fact that maybe I needed more protein.
Mhm.
I've always eaten a lot of good healthy fat, that's for sure. Something I relearned after my 20s that we talked about, where everything was fat free, sugar free,
Mhm.
you know. So I did manage to kind of relearn that, which was a good thing. And but just to better understand, that we don't have to just lean on insulin all the time. That's not our only source of controlling our blood sugar and to reaching a A1C that that we want to meet, whatever that is, time and range, all those terms that we use. But obviously the protein.
Mhm.
And I always say too, this is what I just recently did a workshop here in my town, a local in-person workshop, and the idea that when you start to bring the protein in, really good quality protein, it not only does it satiate us, but it can naturally crowd out the pasta.
Mhm.
And then your taste buds change, your needs change, your body starts to respond, and then you start to see the feeling of it, and then how we should be needing less insulin or requiring less insulin based on that. But it surprises people that it could be that simple. But it does take time. It's not going to happen, with the first meal that you try to do this with.
Well, we're very simple carbohydrate focused,
Mm.
and we've been for years. So we have a meal of pasta and everything else is secondary.
Mm.
And instead of building the meal around a protein, is what we should be doing, is protein should be first. Then let's look at complex carbohydrates, which won't impact your blood sugar as quickly and as much as something that's a simple carbohydrate. And then also having that good fat in there. And so I always say, when I have clients, I'm like, I want you to always think about a protein, fat, and carbohydrate. And you want to eat those proteins and fat first, because that's going to slow down your digestion. Carbohydrates are last, and simple carbohydrates very last,
Mm.
because when you, and this is where, I get with the registered dietitians, like, okay, you can have so many saltine crackers. And I'm like, why would you even tell somebody they can have a saltine cracker? But if you think about a saltine cracker and you put it in your mouth, it
Mhm.
gets sweet. And that is because carbohydrate breakdown happens first in your mouth with an enzyme called amylase.
Mhm.
Protein and fat don't get broken down in the mouth. The enzymes aren't there. They have to go through your digestive tract.
Mhm.
So that's why things can be, where you're like, wait a minute, I just had this and my blood sugar just skyrocketed. Well, with a simple carbohydrate, it's going to do that.
Mhm.
So if you eat the protein, the fat, and you have fiber, it's going to slow everything down. And then you have those simple carbohydrates later. The other thing that you can do is once you're done eating, move your body.
Mhm.
And a good, decent walk for 10 minutes is going to also help decrease the amount of sugar that's in your blood system. It's going to help pull that sugar into your muscles. And once again, so you're not going to get so much of an insulin load. And I know that that scares a lot of type 1 diabetics when they're like, I don't know if I can lift weights. I don't know if I should be working out because they're afraid of bottoming.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's understanding, listening to your body, it's keeping track of what your blood sugar is,
Mhm.
and then knowing that as you get more in shape, as you have more muscle, that you will actually regulate the amount of insulin that you're taking in much better. That if
Yes.
you use a sliding
Mhm.
scale, you're not going to be using a sliding scale as much because we really don't want you to use a sliding scale. So that if you're doing a basal, it's going to work better. You're going to
Mhm.
have better sensitivity and less resistance.
Absolutely. You just nailed it. All those things are so true. So what happens to insulin, the sensitivity factor, once I'm going to jump to hormonal stage of life? Because you mentioned yourself that this is something, because you have that marker for pre-diabetes type 2. So
Mhm.
what sort of things did you notice? I know my listeners, if they're regular on here, they know my story, and I'll be happy to throw it in there as well. But it was significant for me, and I think the number one thing is that the doctors don't put it together. They don't,
Mm.
it's really kind of talked about in its own little compartment. It's very siloed. And you're just going through a different stage. These are just things that are going to happen. You're going to gain weight. You may need more insulin, all these things. And I'm a big believer in why. Tell me why and how this is happening. Is there something I can do to holistically help myself rather than, again, depending on all these other factors like extra insulin and whatever sort of side effects is going to happen with my body. And not to mention, this is not just to talk about our body image. This is not our focus today. It's really about how we feel as women as we're aging with type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors. We're still women. We are women. We want to be vital. We want to be, we want to sleep well. We want to be able to be focused at work. All those things are important. We want to be present with our family. And to just be told, well, you've got a chronic disease, this is just the way it's going to happen. This is, I'm sorry. So these are things I've been told, and these are things that my clients have been told, and it's very sad.
It's very frustrating
Yeah.
when someone just says, well, that's just the way it is.
I
And
know.
when I started going through perimenopause and dealing with I would say the fluffiness, I was teaching
It's a
15
question.
classes a week and eating what I thought was healthy, because I was coaching other things, nutrition, before I started coaching the fast way to fat loss. And it's like, it was so frustrating because here I am, I'm getting fluffier and I'm working out harder. I'm exhausted. My joints hurt. I have brain fog. I mean, it
Mhm.
was all these things and I migraines every single day.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I became a client. It's like I always say, I threw a Hail Mary pass because I'm like, wait a minute, why is this all happening? What's going on? And I
Mhm.
attribute it to, oh, it's perimenopause, menopause. Oh, well, but I wasn't willing to settle. Also, having my hormones done at that same time, realizing what was going on. Estrogen is depleting. And when estrogen goes down, it also affects cholesterol, it affects insulin sensitivity,
Mhm.
affects cardiac. I am a believer of it is up to you on what you want to do. I personally do HRT.
Mhm.
That is something that between you and your practitioner, and if it's right for you or not right for you. But what I also found was that wasn't the saving grace, because it's not oh, here I'm bioidenticals. Here, I'll rub this and
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
weight will go away and everything will be, no, it wasn't. it wasn't until I went through and started cleaning up the getting rid of the processed healthy foods
Mm.
and getting rid of that and start balancing my blood sugar better with whole foods, that was the biggest difference. And because my A1C was 5.9, which is pre-diabetic. And I'm thinking, wait, I'm working out. I'm eating all this healthy
Mhm.
food. What's going on? Why is this? Why is this? And when I started really pulling back and going into whole foods, looking holistically, adding weightlifting, my A1C is back down to 5.2. And not only that, it was, guess what went away? Joint pain,
Mm.
the brain fog, migraines. I haven't had a migraine in 4 years, knock on wood. And,
Wow.
those are debilitating.
Sure.
And it's it has to go hand in hand. I always say people like they'll look at something and say, "Oh, let me do this." The latest fad. Oh, wait, maybe I'll just try intermittent fasting. Oh no, well maybe I'll have the thing is Ozempic now. If you see TikTok, it's like, oh, let me do this fad diet here. Let me do
Mhm.
this, and instead of putting the whole kit and caboodle, it's your fitness, it's your nutrition, it's
Mhm.
your mental health, and your whether you're meditating or your outlook that is also going to affect on how you feel and how you go on this journey. Because the one thing that we do very well as women is we beat ourselves up and we think that we're the problem. And it's you put your hands up and say, I can't solve this, but we can.
Yeah.
We can.
Mhm.
And like I said, whether you go on HRT or not, you're still able to get better and to have better insulin sensitivity.
Mhm.
And it just depends on what your personal journey wants to be.
Yeah, yeah. And you brought up a good point too, because it really is about our choices. And I think, and one of the first things you said is get tested.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pushback. Doctors don't generally know, if they're testing, how to read them. This is something I've heard. They don't really know how to interpret them or what to do with it after the fact, because OBGYNs are typically not trained
Mhm.
in hormones at all,
No.
which is shocking. So you really got to find a practitioner that's going
Yes.
to
And
fill in
that's
that.
and that's the first thing to find somebody. And people ask me, when should I
Mhm.
get tested? And I'm like, now.
Yeah.
And the reason,
Yeah.
if you're not in menopause and you are just going through perimenopause, or even if you haven't gone through perimenopause yet, when I started feeling some hot flashes to begin with, and I was in peri for several years, I
Typical.
got my levels done at that time so that we could watch
There you go. A
because
foundation to start with.
you
Yeah,
have to have some
absolutely.
foundation to start with so that we know
Mm-hmm.
at that time what was my quote unquote normal at that
Right.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that way, when, I was kind of menopausal, and menopause is when you don't have a period for a year. That's what's
Mm-hmm.
considered menopause.
Mm-hmm.
And so that way we could follow, and then we could decide, because my practitioner is a holistic practitioner, who knows how to read hormones, and we could
Mm-hmm.
decide what was the best course for me at that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then the connection with those of us with type 1, because we're so used to those other tests being done, because we're not new to lab tests,
Yeah.
if we're seeing our endo on a regular basis. So the fact that this needs to be it needs to be butted up against or with our insulin, our daily insulin intake, our A1C, obviously, because
Yeah.
that's the measure. But this is something I don't know if this is something that you're familiar with, and if this is something that you're recommending with your clients. But insulin levels, that fasting insulin
It's a
level,
level. Yeah.
it's starting to get talked about more and more. And I'm mentioning that to my clients, and they'll be like, "Oh, well, my doctor hasn't mentioned that." Well, mention it to them.
Hmm.
And these are generally the ones that are, obviously, if you're type 1, this is not necessarily a test that's going to mean much, but the ones that are coming to me in menopause old years that are starting to get that high A1C, and they're, all the signs are there. But that one very important marker is really talking about the metabolic health. And
Hmm.
just like you said with the cholesterol, how it's all one big ball. I mean, it's all connected.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing and empowering when we can have these tests done. And even if we're struggling through this time of life, knowing and we have a doctor we can talk to, and together you have a game plan and you feel more empowered
Hmm.
rather than having to take a step back, taking a big sigh and just say, well, I guess that's all I can do. I'm just going to have to make the best of it. So,
And, you know,
yeah.
and I like how you said, getting that fasting insulin, because it goes hand in hand with your A1C. And so if you can kind of see what's going on, and I know people are like, well, who do I find? The nice thing about, I won't say nice thing about COVID, but the thing about COVID is that it opened up a plethora of people who do things virtually. Like
Mhm.
I am a virtual health coach. I have clients all over the world. So do a lot of hormone doctors now,
Right.
that they
That's true.
have a virtual practice. So
Mhm.
even if you don't have somebody who's down the street, there is somebody that possibly that you can see. And the questions are, what tests do they run? And do they understand the tests that they're running? Do they understand a fasting insulin? Do they understand A1C? Do they understand hormones? And not that they just want to throw supplements at you or certain other things. It's like that
Mhm.
they have your best interest in mind and are able to help you through your journey. So I always say,
Absolutely.
don't be afraid to ask questions and do your
Mhm.
research. And that way, I hate to say it, but especially as females, we have to be our own self advocates.
Oh yeah.
We
Oh
have
yeah.
to, because
Mhm.
a lot of times, and I get this from clients going, oh, my doctor just says this is just the way it is. Just
Yeah.
deal with it. And
Mhm.
9 times out of 10, it's usually a male. It's usually a
Right.
male
I
physician who does it,
know.
because
I
the
know.
females don't, they understand. But they're like, it's just your time of life. You're just gonna have to deal with it. And I'm like, you know
Mm.
what? If I don't think you would settle for
Right.
that answer.
Right, right. That used to be the old script, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, we are rewriting the script nowadays. I know it's going to take time for sure.
Yeah.
I want to get back to insulin too, about how important. I would like to, just as we're talking here, for those of you who are listening, to really be looking closer at your own insulin, your daily insulin dosing. And a lot of people are on pumps, especially around this time of hormonal changes. This is something I've worked with a few clients on as well, and they didn't really understand how important that was. But again, and it's not a judgment, and there is no right or wrong insulin per day. It's really where you are, and kind of focusing on what your number, your total number of units per day is,
Mhm.
and setting your own benchmark and seeing how that does impact not only, and you were talking about inflammation, the migraines, the brain fog, all that is, because insulin means sugar in the system, sugar means inflammation. So
Mhm.
that's another thing, feeding the fire of those hormones, those hormones that are dropping as well. you know so that's something that I would encourage our listeners to have a look at. And our pump reports, even if you're MDI like I am, I have ways of getting this data. It's not hard to find. It takes 10 seconds on our apps. The information is there, but it's data, it's information, and we can learn. And these are things to take to the doctor to ask those questions on. And then, so what do you think about that as far as just keeping
Well,
track?
absolutely,
Yeah.
because it's like any data. Like I wear an Oura ring and a Apple Watch. It's like you want that information. You want that total amount of insulin, or how much basal that you're using. Are you having to go up? Why are you having to go up?
Mhm.
Are you sick? Are you going to a lot of parties? Are you drinking a lot of alcohol?
Right.
And all of those will affect your total day.
Mhm.
And what we want is for you to be consistent,
Mhm.
not constantly going up, not constantly going down. We want that consistency.
Yeah.
And if you're chasing your blood glucose numbers with your insulin because, oh, I'm going to have a cookie. Oh, I'm going to have this simple carbohydrate, that is causing inflammation.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
insulin's not the bad guy. And we make it, sometimes we make insulin the villain.
That's true. That's true. That's
Insulin
right.
is
We got to
not
back up
the
and say that.
yeah,
Mm-mm.
insulin is not the bad guy. Insulin is a great hormone, we just have to help it. And we have to help it with our nutrition. And once you start, whether you're type 1 or type 2, once you start fueling your body right and helping your body with real food nutrition, with getting rid of some of the ultra processed foods, type 1, type 2, you're going to see better glucose control. You're going to feel better. And unfortunately, what I see a lot of times in the nursing homes is very poor control or brittle control, because they've never, we call some people, a brittle diabetic.
Yeah.
They just don't eat real food. It's all processed. It's very processed. And then we have inflammation and we have wounds that don't heal because of the constant high sugar content in their blood. So if you can still eat, you can still eat really good food and keep your blood sugar stable, you're going to feel so much better and you're going to prevent so many more disease states later on in life.
Amen to that. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Bring in the good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So protein builds muscle. Muscle is a metabolically healthy, drives insulin sensitivity. Lots of pluses to building muscle. We look healthy and we function better. Our bones are stronger. So there's a lot of pluses. We've talked a lot about that here on the show. Anything else I'm leaving out?
No, I would think that, well, I'll say, yeah, there's a lot. I can go on and on. No, but the big thing is the shape that you want, the shape that you're trying to get is muscle. And, we think about, oh no, I don't want to eat, or let me get off my insulin, which is the worst part. Don't ever do that. I know I deal with a lot of teenage girls who think that's the way to lose weight if they're type 1. And it's like, that breaks my heart.
Right.
That's not the shape that you want, is with muscle. And, like I said, don't be afraid if you're insulin dependent. You're like, oh my gosh, but it's going to affect, I'm going to drop, I'm going to bottom out. Go slow, listen to your body, watch your numbers, and you can definitely get the body that you want, feel better, and still build muscle.
Absolutely. Yeah. It really is important to go slow and to start to get used to how that feels, and really how you're, especially with insulin time, or adjusting, or, just trying to find a diet that's going to mirror up to that. So really good. Something you mentioned earlier too, that I think this is typical for this time of life, for empty nesters, maybe job transition, lots of things that are that are just kind of changing our lifestyle, is stress. And this is a big topic. And I think that might be part of really what's happening as well. I think that's part of the puzzle. This time of life is, unfortunately, we're living in a different time. Our mothers' hormones and menopause might not have been, they might have been a little different. I don't know, and it goes to show you how different we all are. But I think that was a different time. But nowadays, with just the impact of the cortisol, and my listeners they're not unfamiliar with this term. This is something, the dawn phenomenon, waking up high. It's funny because I've just recently just working out my own dosing, because it is always work. And that's another thing to consider, is we're never going to be done with this adjustment or these navigating, what those doses should be, depending on, the stage of life we're in and all of that. But I've given into the fact that I need to take a bolus when I get up in the morning, and I've never had to do that. I've always been able to wait till I ate. But what's happened is, I wake up at a pretty good number, anywhere from like 90 to like 110. That's really good. So, you're good. Drink the water, get the coffee going. But coffee, and then just that natural cortisol dump that many of us experience, it just starts to nudge up. So without a bolus of like maybe 2 units of insulin, I'm pushing 150, 160. Again, it depends. And it goes to show you every day is a little different. And so I'm like, well, why don't I just take those 2 units first thing in the morning? Where's the judgment in that? It's not a sign of weakness. It's good timing that I'm going to prevent that spike that only leaves me frustrated and feeling like I should have and I could have. So isn't that funny? But it's great to say, okay, just give in. It's liberating. This is best for me, and I'll never look back from that decision. So those are just a good, those are good tips and good ways to kind of own these decisions. Definitely check with your doctor about this type of, bolus and, as far as your basal rates and all of that. I'm not going to tell you what to do, ladies. I'm telling you what is working for me. And it is one of those things, things are going to change. And, just find a way to kind of bounce off of that. But
well, also, it depends on, stress is huge. Stress and cortisol and cortisol and glucose are right there. They're synergistic. And if you're not sleeping, if you're having, and guess what happens in perimenopause and menopause? Hello, sleep, right? It's not as good. So thinking about, okay, how can I get better sleep so I can decrease the amount of cortisol? Having good sleep hygiene, which is good sleep habits. So is your room cooler? Are you getting rid of the blue light? Not putting, put that phone down, people. Having some kind of routine, maybe some meditation, and trying to decrease that amount of cortisol. Now, cortisol, once again, is a natural hormone. It's there, but we do have a lot of stressors. So helping things to come down a little bit. And yeah, I mean, your bolus, what you're using is what somebody else who's not a type 1 diabetic, their body automatically is going to do that for them. So there's no shame in that. You're mimicking something that your body needs help with. And there, you should never, ever feel that is you're letting yourself down or being disappointed, because every day's different. Everyday stressors are different. The thing is that you are being proactive and not putting your head in the sand and be like, oh no, this is not happening to me. This is not happening to me, and not dealing with it. You're being proactive and actually taking care of it so that you're not having this spike later on. And also you're looking at your cortisol levels. You're looking at, okay, how can I decrease my cortisol? So I think what you're doing is amazing. And that's just showing that you are taking a very good responsibility, proactive stance on your health.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. And this, I was just using that too as an example of things are going to change. And I think the first thing we can do, and we're so lucky to have all these tools and data, if we're lucky to have a CGM like I am, and many of us, I'm not sure what menopause with type 1 would have been without a CGM. It would have been even more of a hot mess, or a mystery. It would have been more of a frustrating mystery. So definitely something to lean on and use, and to use it for your, for the good, so that we can make, like you say, proactive choices and decisions.
Things, type 1 might know this, but if you ever, someone's like, well, what CGM, continuous glucose monitor. And if you're looking at using one, understand that the first 24 hours, you have to test your blood sugar because it's calibrating. And to know that it's not the end all be all. And I have a lot of people who are borderline type 2, and their doctor will not prescribe them one. And then go ahead and get a blood glucose meter, because you can get that at any pharmacy, and you can see how food reacts. And to remember about a CGM is that a CGM is about a 5 to 10 minute delay. I would say it's like you have the engine of the train, and that is your blood sugar at that moment. So if you prick your finger, that is the true blood sugar. That's what's going on. And then you have the caboose, which is your CGM. And it's a little bit latent because it's interstitial fluid. So if you're I always say, it's like, someone's like, well, my mom is in a nursing home. I don't recommend CGMs for nursing home patients because you need an app, you have to have a phone, you really need to know how to know those numbers and understand those numbers. And if somebody goes hypoglycemic, it can be a latent effect that you might be feeling really bad and saying, oh, my numbers are fine, but you're actually hypoglycemic. So always listen to your body too. But if you're using it for nutrition and to see how food works, it's great to see, like I said, I use the CGM too. It's great to see patterns and say, oh, when I just have a banana by itself, my blood sugar skyrockets. But if I have some protein and some fat and some high fiber stuff and then eat a banana, it doesn't, it's a very small bump instead of this huge spike.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh gosh, it's fun. I know. I have friends that just have a glucometer and it's so funny. I get messages from them. So I just had a banana an hour ago. It remind me, what that, because they're learning and it's fascinating. It really is. And what I've seen as well and what they've shared with me is they're pairing that with what, a food that they thought was okay. I'm just throwing banana. And again, I'm
Okay.
not trying to beat up on bananas, but, but this is an example that she used, and knowing that, just that dip that she had eating that, because bananas do tend to be higher glycemic. They're going to get to the bloodstream a little quicker. She's like, and then I kind of work with her about how we can add some protein to that banana to kind of mitigate that, slow it down a little bit. So yeah, we're all learning. Yeah, it's great
There's a
stuff.
huge difference for me, especially if I have a greener banana that has resistant
Mm-hmm.
starch
Mm-hmm.
compared to a one that's riper that has the more sugar. So
Mm-hmm.
it's also learning what's best for your body. And I'll never forget that when I started first wearing a CGM, my husband and I went out to dinner. It was a birthday dinner, and I had some fries, thinking nothing of it. And I'm like, I just don't feel good. And
Mm-hmm.
looking at my numbers, and my numbers skyrocketing. And I'm like, this can't be right. This can't be right. And I take it with my, do a little finger prick. And I'm like, sure enough. And I'm like, my husband's feeling fine. I'm like, let's just do you. I'm just curious. Not a problem. And I'm
Good.
like, and
Good
that's what you have to
example.
realize is that everybody is
Everybody's.
different,
Mm-hmm.
because you'll have somebody going, well, I don't understand why you feel this way because I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
don't ever let that person dictate the way that you feel, or think that you shouldn't feel this way, because they don't.
That's right.
Everybody's individual, everybody's different. And that's why you have to do what's good for you.
Mm, I love how you said that. That is perfect. And that's actually the perfect way to end our talk today. But before we go, I know you have a lot going on, but before we go, I would like for you've shared a couple of really good tips. But are there, based on the topic we mentioned today, and we were talking about insulin and how it impacts obviously hormones and our weight and our choices for food. So, what are some steps that our listeners could take if they're in that stage of life? Maybe they haven't gotten their test, and that might be your first step: is get those hormones
Yes.
checked.
Yeah.
Don't guess, get them tested, find out what your foundation is. But some things that they can do now to kind of set themselves up for success. And my hope is to get women, no matter who's listening, but to get you before you even get to, say the perimenopause. Because perimenopause, I mean, it can start as early as, 35. Again, it's
Five.
different
Yeah.
for everybody. Those numbers are just, those average ages are just, it's crazy. I mean, and they can last, 8 to 10 years, again, depending on the woman. But I wished I had known what I know. I wished I had known then what I know now. It would have made the transition a lot easier. I would have had the questions in my back pocket to talk with the doctor about. So, what kind of advice would you give for those ladies listening?
I would say first get off the diet train.
Mm,
Stop with the quick fixes, stop with the fad diets, and start getting on the health and longevity train, knowing that day one starts today and it doesn't end until our last breath on this earth.
mm,
And understand that baby steps are okay. We want things so fast. We want things now. That's why Ozempic and those things have taken off, because people can lose weight very quickly. Doesn't mean it's healthy. So get help if you need it. I mean, seriously, get help if you need it,
mm,
because sometimes you need that cheerleader. Sometimes you just need to talk it out, because I could tell you what to eat, and you are more than welcome to get a 5-day blueprint from me that will help you with recipes. But it's a lot of times what's in our head and our beliefs and our motivation or lack of. And that is something that we have to work on a daily basis. So think baby steps. So what can you do? Can I walk today? Can I replace this Pop Tart or breakfast sandwich with something that might be less processed? And if you start thinking about less processed food, eating real food, and moving your body, building muscle, those are your keys right there.
yeah, yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah. And to pay attention to how we're feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
To don't let other people or doctors dismiss how we're feeling, because we know ourselves best, don't we?
We do. We absolutely do.
Yeah, we are our own best doctors. So, well, how can our listeners connect with you, Amy?
Well, if they've gotten this far, I would love to give them a 5-day free fat loss blueprint. It
Mm-hmm.
is lots of recipes and kind of like the beginning steps of what I coach. You can get me on my website at www.amykwilson.com and send me a message and just put insulin and I'll know it came from this podcast. And I'll send you that 5-day blueprint. Or if you are an Instagrammer, you can find me on Instagram at the Nutrition Coach Pharmacist. That's at the Nutrition Coach Pharmacist. Send me a DM and put
Yeah.
insulin, and I will be glad to send you that 5-day blueprint.
Yeah, and we're going to link all this in the show notes to make it super easy, just a click away. So thanks again for being here. I feel like we just touched the surface, but
We did.
these are really good, important topics that we need to keep reiterating and keep reminding ourselves as well. We're going through this just like you are, ladies, and we need to do this together, and we need to do it with sound support and resources. So thanks again, Amy, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Melissa.
And we hope you enjoyed the show. And please, reach out to Amy and I on Instagram. I'm at Blood Sugar Boss, and tell us what you thought about the show. Ask your questions, and we'd love to hear from you. And until next week, we will say goodbye for now. Have a beautiful day. Thank you for listening to the Type 1 and Midlife podcast. We are so grateful for the time that we spent together today. And if this conversation resonated with you, or you just love connecting with others living with T1D, please take a moment to leave a rating and review. Your feedback helps us reach more people who need this community and resources. And if you realize you need more support than you're currently getting, remember you don't have to struggle alone. Visit me at abundanthealthwithmelissa.com for free resources on mastering type 1 diabetes in menopause, and to stay connected and learn about my coaching programs. We look forward to being together next Monday. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single episode. Remember that together we can age gracefully with type 1 diabetes.